The latchkey generation. If that phrase rings a bell for you, then you probably already know the feeling I'm talking about. We're going to dive deep into the psychology of a generation that was really defined by an empty house and a key hanging around their neck. This rule, if you know it, you know it. For a lot of kids, this was basically the only tether you had in a childhood of almost total freedom. It was the sound of, go do whatever you want. But it was also the sound of, you're completely on your own until then. You know, today you hear people talk about the 70s, and they get all nostalgic. They see this golden age of independence. But if you actually lived it, you know there's a much darker, maybe lonelier truth hiding just under the surface. So let's start with that myth, the one everyone loves to romanticize. We're calling it feral freedom, this idea of a wild, completely unsupervised childhood. I mean, this really captures it, doesn't it? You'd leave the house in the morning, and your parents had absolutely zero idea where you were until dinner. No cell phones, no tracking apps, no check-in texts. It was just you, your bike, and this feeling of absolute untamed freedom. But here's the thing. That freedom wasn't just for summer vacation. The real story, the one that shaped a generation, was happening every single day after school in millions of empty houses. And this created what we're going to call the Latchkey Kid effect. And just like that, this became the new normal. See, for the first time, it was really common for both parents to be in the workforce. And that meant millions of kids had a house key on a shoelace around their neck, letting themselves into a quiet, empty house. Okay, now this is the psychological catch. On the surface, everyone praised you for being so mature, so grown up. But you weren't just learning how to make a sandwich. Your brain was quietly learning a much deeper lesson. If you have a problem, if you're scared, if you're sad, there's nobody here to help you. You just have to deal with it. Hyper-independence wasn't a choice, it was a survival strategy. So, at the same time, kids were learning to parent themselves inside the home. Well, the very walls of that home were often shaking. There was this huge emotional earthquake happening for the very adults who were supposed to be in charge. And this chart, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? Take a look at that spike. When no-fault divorce became a thing, the rates more than doubled in just one decade. So while the wider culture was all about peace and love, the actual family unit was quietly coming apart at the seams. And if you were a kid caught right in the middle of all this adult drama and upheaval, you learned a very clear, even if unspoken, rule about your place in this whole emotional mess. Right, this was basically the parenting philosophy of the day. You're watching the grown-ups in your life navigate these massive personal crises, and nobody ever really stopped to ask, hey, how are you feeling about all this? Your feelings were, at best, an inconvenience. So this is the lesson that gets burned into your brain. You start to develop this deep distrust of authority. You learn that adults are flawed, that systems can fail, and that when it really comes down to it, you are on your own. It's why, even today, when you get overwhelmed, what do? You don't ask for help, you just go quiet and figure it out yourself. So how does all this baggage carry over into today? Well, that armor you had to build as a kid, it doesn't just vanish when you grow up. It absolutely has a lasting impact. This comparison right here explains so much. We're living in this age of therapy speak, where everyone's talking about their trauma and their triggers and their boundaries. But if your entire childhood was basically defined by being told to suck it up or walk it off, seeing this constant need for emotional validation can be, well, it can be incredibly frustrating. But what if we dig a little deeper here? What if we ask a much harder question? Is that frustration really anger at younger generations for being soft? Or could it be grief? Could it be your inner child quietly mourning the comfort and the vulnerability and the softness you were never ever allowed to have? You're not unfeeling. You just have decades of practice keeping that armor locked in place. But listen, this legacy isn't all about scars and armor. No way. It's also a story of this profound, quiet strength. It's what makes this generation the unbreakable survivors. It's true. You're kind of wedged between the massive boomer generation and the very loud millennials, so you often get overlooked. But here's a thought. Maybe being forgotten isn't an insult? Maybe for a generation raised on radical self-reliance, being left alone to just do your own thing is exactly what you'd prefer. And these are the superpowers that were forged in that silent, unsupervised world. That resilience that comes from knowing you have no other choice but to bounce back. The sarcasm that works like a shield. That quiet strength that just keeps you moving forward, especially when no one is watching. And of course, that fierce hyper-independence, the core belief that you can, and you must, handle it all yourself. And this is really the ultimate paradox, isn't it? Yes, absolutely, there are scars. Scars left by the silence of an empty house and the emotional neglect of an entire era. But that very same silence is what made you resourceful, capable, and at your core, fundamentally unbreakable. So we end on this. That unbreakable strength, it came at a price. It created a whole generation of survivors who are incredibly competent, but who often find it almost impossible to ask for help, to be vulnerable, or to truly believe that anyone else will ever really have their back. So the question is, what is the price of that kind of survival?